Wrong door. Deliveries go around back. Officer Daniel Mercer said it before Rachel Bennett could raise her credential toward the scanner. The words landed in the empty marble lobby like a lock turning. Outside, November rain silvered the steps of the Joint Operations Command Center, and cold water gathered along the hem of Rachel's charcoal coat. She stood beneath the white security lights with a sealed red briefcase in one hand and a federal credential wallet in the other. Daniel did not examine either one. He simply placed his palm over the scanner and looked at her as though the decision had already been made. "My credentials will open this entrance," Rachel said. Her voice was steady, almost quiet. Daniel glanced at her plain coat, her unmarked briefcase, and the empty space behind her where he expected an escort to be. People with that clearance do not arrive alone. Behind the glass doors, a digital clock changed to 6:17 in the morning. The classified meeting on the 6th floor would begin in 13 minutes, and the file Rachel carried contained the name of someone working inside the building. If stories about courage, dignity, and truth matter to you, subscribe and stay with Rachel, because the officer blocking her had no idea why every senior agent upstairs was waiting for this black woman to arrive. Rachel lifted her credential wallet just high enough for the federal seal and her photograph to catch the overhead light. "Enter the badge number," she said. Daniel did not reach for it. Anyone can buy a wallet that looks official. Rachel studied his face. There was no uncertainty in it, only the comfort of a man who trusted his judgment more than the system beside him. A security camera rested above the door, its dark lens pointed directly at them. Rachel looked at it, then back at Daniel. "You have not checked the roster." "I do not need to." The answer came too quickly. Beyond the glass, employees moved through the lobby carrying coffee and laptop bags. Several glanced toward Rachel, but none stopped. Daniel opened the visitor log and began writing. Unidentified female. Refused redirection. Claimed federal authority. Rachel watched the words appear beneath his pen. "You wrote unidentified after seeing my identification." Daniel closed the log halfway. "Step away from the secure entrance." Rachel felt the insult settle beneath her ribs, sharp but familiar. 30 years earlier, her father had stood outside a federal courthouse with a valid summons in his hand while a guard directed him toward a service entrance. Rachel had been 9 years old. She still remembered the rain on his shoulders and the way he refused to become cruel in response. That memory kept her voice level now. "Call federal security," she said. Daniel straightened. "I am security." "Then follow the security procedure." His jaw tightened. He moved the scanner farther from her reach and pointed toward the side corridor. "You can wait there until someone confirms your story." Rachel glanced through the glass at the elevator bank. Somewhere above them, Special Agent in Charge Thomas Whitmore was preparing to brief a room full of investigators about a leak that had already compromised 3 operations. Rachel had been ordered to arrive without notice because anyone inside the task force could be responsible. Calling Thomas directly would force the door open, but it might also alert the person named in the red file. She could not risk it. A black analyst named Marcus Reed crossed the lobby and slowed when he saw her. Recognition flashed across his face. Rachel gave him the smallest shake of her head. "Do not reveal me." Marcus continued walking, but his hand slipped into his coat pocket toward his telephone. Daniel saw only another employee passing by. He returned to the log and added one more word beneath Rachel's description. Uncooperative. Rachel placed her credential wallet on the counter between them. "Scan it," she said. Daniel closed the book. "Not today." At that moment, the ceiling camera turned slightly toward him. Somewhere in the security control room, another person had begun watching. 10 hours earlier, Rachel Bennett stood alone in the secure briefing room of the downtown federal field office while a wall clock moved past 8 in the evening. The city lights beyond the windows were blurred by rain, and the conference table held only 3 items: a sealed red briefcase, a printed access report, and a telephone connected to an encrypted line. Special Agent in Charge Thomas Whitmore remained standing at the far end of the room, his jacket folded over one chair and exhaustion visible beneath his eyes. "We have a leak," he said. Rachel did not touch the briefcase. "How many operations?" 3 confirmed. Possibly 4. Thomas slid the access report toward her. 6 weeks of internal entries filled the pages. Confidential schedules had been viewed hours before surveillance teams were compromised. Protected addresses had been opened from terminals belonging to people who had no reason to see them. Each breach appeared small when examined alone. Together, they formed a deliberate path through the task force. "Who knows about this review?" Rachel asked. "You, me, and one analyst in Washington." "No local notification?" "None." Thomas looked toward the red briefcase. "The correlation report is inside. It points to someone with high-level access in the Joint Operations Command Center." Rachel opened the first page of the access summary but stopped before reading the final name. She had spent 14 years investigating public corruption, civil rights violations, and officials who believed authority protected them from scrutiny. She knew the most dangerous people were rarely the loudest. They were the ones who understood systems well enough to hide inside procedure. "Why bring me in now?" she asked. Thomas sat across from her. "Because the appointment became official this afternoon." He placed a second document beside the report. "Rachel Bennett, Assistant Special Agent in Charge." The title looked unfamiliar even though she had worked toward it for years. "The announcement is not public," Thomas continued. "Most of the task force still thinks you are arriving next month." Rachel understood immediately. Her new role gave her authority to examine the unit without alerting the person under suspicion. It also made her invisible to anyone relying on old rosters, familiar faces, or assumptions. "You want me inside before the morning briefing?" 6:30. No motorcade. No advance call to local security. Use the East employee entrance and carry the file yourself. Rachel looked at the red briefcase. Its lock required both her credential and Thomas's authorization code. "If the leak sees me arrive, then the evidence may disappear before we reach the 6th floor." Thomas lowered his voice. "That is why no one can know the purpose of your visit." Rachel closed the report. Her reflection appeared faintly in the dark window behind Thomas, a black woman in a plain charcoal suit standing in a room where decisions were often made by people who never had to prove they belonged. She thought of her father, Samuel Bennett, who had worked 32 years as a postal supervisor and still carried every appointment letter in a clear plastic folder because strangers often trusted paper more than his word. When Rachel was 9, she had accompanied him to a federal courthouse after he received a witness summons. A guard looked at his work jacket, ignored the document in his hand, and directed him toward a service entrance. Samuel did not argue. He simply asked the guard to read the name on the summons. Later, Rachel asked why he had remained calm. "Because anger would have become the only thing he remembered," her father said. "I needed him to remember the mistake." That lesson followed Rachel through the academy, courtrooms, and interviews with officials who confused restraint with weakness. At 5:45 the next morning, she left her apartment carrying the red briefcase and wearing a charcoal coat without agency markings. She drove herself through nearly empty streets while rain swept across the windshield. The encrypted telephone remained powered off inside her bag. No one at the command center received notice that she was coming. When she reached the east entrance at 6:16, the lobby lights were already on. Officer Daniel Mercer stood behind the security station, drinking coffee beside a scanner that held Rachel's name at the top of the authorized entry list. He looked through the glass, saw her approaching alone, and formed an opinion before she ever reached the door. Daniel Mercer had worked the east entrance of the Joint Operations Command Center for 7 years, long enough to believe he could identify authority before a credential ever reached the scanner. He knew which prosecutors arrived in dark sedans, which supervisors carried leather briefcases, and which senior agents walked through the lobby without slowing down. When familiar white officials approached, Daniel often pressed the release button before they raised their badges. He called it efficiency. When contractors, new employees, or black staff members arrived, he called the same shortcut a security risk. The difference had never appeared in his official reports. On paper, Daniel was disciplined, experienced, and attentive. His personnel file included commendations for locating a missing child during a courthouse evacuation and coordinating emergency access after a power failure. Captain Laura Mitchell trusted him with early shifts because he rarely arrived late and never left the station unattended. Yet the people who passed through his checkpoint understood another version of his reliability. Daniel remembered faces he respected and questioned faces he did not expect to see. Marcus Reed had learned that lesson 6 months earlier. Marcus worked as an intelligence analyst on the 4th floor and had entered the building nearly every weekday for 3 years. One morning, after replacing a damaged credential, he presented the temporary card issued by federal security. The scanner confirmed it. Daniel still kept him outside for 22 minutes while white employees with familiar faces passed through without being checked. Marcus later filed a complaint describing the unequal treatment. Daniel responded that Marcus had displayed an impatient attitude. The review was closed as a communication problem. Maria Torres, the federal security supervisor, spoke to Daniel privately afterward. The scanner verifies access, she told him. Your instincts do not replace it. Daniel smiled as if she had offered advice for inexperienced officers. Machines read numbers, he said. I read behavior. Maria remembered the sentence. She also remembered how often behavior seemed suspicious to Daniel only after he saw who was standing at the door. At 6:16 that rainy morning, Daniel sat behind the security desk with a paper cup beside the visitor log. The authorized entry roster was already open on his monitor. Rachel Bennett's name appeared at the top with a temporary note indicating executive clearance and restricted disclosure. Daniel did not read far enough to see it. He looked through the glass first. Rachel approached alone, carrying a sealed red briefcase and wearing a plain charcoal coat. No driver waited behind her. No marked federal vehicle stood at the curb. No assistant hurried to open the door. Daniel saw those absences and decided they meant something. When Rachel reached the entrance, she raised her credential toward the glass. Daniel stepped forward before the scanner could register it. His hand covered the reader. Wrong entrance, he said. The words came from habit, not evidence. Rachel asked him to verify her badge. Daniel glanced at the wallet, saw the federal seal, and felt irritation rather than caution. In his mind, a person who truly belonged would not need to insist. She would look familiar. She would arrive with the signals he trusted. Behind him, the monitor remained unchanged, Rachel's name still visible at the top of the list. Daniel opened the visitor log instead. Unidentified female. Refused redirection. Claimed federal authority. As his pen moved, Marcus Reed crossed the lobby carrying a laptop bag. He recognized Rachel from a confidential leadership bulletin distributed the previous afternoon. Her appointment had not been publicly announced, but analysts assigned to the morning briefing had been told to expect her. Marcus slowed. Rachel met his eyes and gave a barely visible shake of the head. Do not reveal the mission. Marcus understood. He continued toward the elevator, then turned down a side corridor and placed a call through the secure internal line. Maria, he said quietly, you need to look at the east entrance camera. In the control room 2 floors below, Maria brought the live feed onto her main screen. She saw Rachel standing in the rain-damp lobby. She saw the credential wallet on the counter. She saw Daniel's hand blocking the scanner. Then she zoomed in on the visitor log and read the word uncooperative forming beneath his pen. Maria reached for the recording controls and created a protected copy of the feed. Upstairs, Daniel closed the log and looked at Rachel with the confidence of a man who believed the building had already agreed with him. He did not know the machine beside his hand had been ready to turn green the entire time. Rachel left the credential wallet on the counter between them. The federal seal reflected the white security light, and her photograph was clearly visible beneath it. Daniel looked down for less than a second, then pushed the wallet back without entering the number. That does not prove you are cleared for this building, he said. Rachel kept both hands beside the red briefcase. The scanner will prove it. Daniel moved closer to the reader, blocking it with his body. You are not using that device until I know who you are. You have my name, photograph, agency seal, and badge number. I have what you handed me. The distinction was meaningless, but Daniel spoke as though suspicion itself had become evidence. Rachel glanced at the clock. 6:21. 9 minutes remained before the classified briefing. Every minute she stayed outside increased the possibility that the person named in the file would notice her absence and begin removing evidence. She could call Thomas Whitmore directly. His voice would bring supervisors, open doors, and end Daniel's certainty within seconds. It could also create an internal record visible to the very person she had been sent to investigate. Rachel picked up the wallet and opened it again. "Call federal security," she said. Daniel folded his arms. "I am the officer assigned to this entrance." "You are local security. Call the federal supervisor responsible for credential verification." His expression hardened. "You do not direct operations here." Rain tapped steadily against the glass behind her. The red briefcase felt heavier in her hand, not because of its weight, but because of the name sealed inside it. Rachel knew Daniel was waiting for frustration. If she raised her voice, he would add it to the report. If she stepped toward the scanner, he would describe it as aggressive movement. Every response had already been prepared for her before she arrived. "Enter the number," she repeated. Daniel opened the visitor log again. "Unverified individuals wait in the side corridor." Rachel read the line he had written beneath her description. Claimed federal authority. She looked at him. "You saw a federal credential." "I saw something designed to look like one." "Then verification protects both of us." Daniel paused, but only long enough to make his refusal deliberate. "Step away from the entrance." Behind the glass, an elevator opened. Two white attorneys crossed the lobby, lifted their badges from several feet away, and received a nod from Daniel without being stopped. Neither credential touched a scanner. Rachel watched the doors close behind them. Daniel noticed where she was looking. "They work here," he said. "You recognize them?" "Yes. But recognition is not the procedure." His hand tightened around the pen. "I know who belongs in this building." The sentence settled into the cold lobby more clearly than anything he had written. Rachel looked directly at him. "That is the problem." In the control room, Maria Torres enlarged the camera feed and checked the authorized entry roster. Rachel Bennett appeared at the top with active executive clearance and a restricted disclosure notice. Maria tried Daniel's desk line. The telephone beside him began ringing. He glanced at the display, saw the control room extension, and silenced it. Rachel heard the call stop. "Your supervisor is trying to reach you," she said. "You do not know that. You refused the scanner. Now you are refusing the telephone." Daniel closed the visitor log. "This conversation is over." At that moment, Marcus Reed entered the control room and placed his secure telephone beside Maria. "The 6th floor is asking where she is," he said. Maria looked at the protected video copy, then at Daniel's unanswered line. "Keep them waiting 30 more seconds." Back at the entrance, Rachel rested 2 fingers on the edge of her credential wallet. She remained calm, but the clock had reached 6:24. Daniel reached for a temporary exclusion form and began filling in her name. For the first time that morning, he copied it correctly. Then the electronic lock behind him released with a sharp click. The electronic lock released, and Maria Torres stepped through the inner door with a tablet in one hand. Daniel looked surprised, then quickly returned to the exclusion form as though the sound had meant nothing. "Control room called twice," Maria said. "I was handling a security concern," he replied. Rachel remained beside the counter, rainwater darkening the edge of her charcoal coat. Maria looked at the credential wallet, the untouched scanner, and the visitor log lying open beneath Daniel's hand. "Did you verify her badge number?" she asked. Daniel did not answer directly. She arrived through the wrong entrance and refused redirection. Maria glanced toward the sign above the glass doors. Authorized personnel entrance. This is the employee entrance. Not for unidentified visitors. Rachel looked at the line Daniel had written. He copied my full name onto the exclusion form. Maria's eyes moved to the page. Rachel Bennett. The name was written clearly beneath the earlier description that called her unidentified. Daniel shifted the form away. A name is not clearance. That is why the scanner exists, Maria said. Her voice was quiet, but the authority in it changed the air. Daniel rested one hand on the reader. I have discretion when behavior raises concern. Rachel kept her gaze on him. What behavior? You challenged instructions. I requested verification. You refused to leave. Because my credentials authorize entry. Several employees crossed the lobby toward the elevators. They slowed when they saw Maria standing at the desk, but none came closer. Daniel seemed to notice their attention. His voice became louder. This individual attempted to gain access without confirmed authorization. Rachel felt the humiliation sharpen as the words traveled across the marble floor. A junior agent near the elevator turned to look. A contractor carrying equipment lowered his eyes and continued walking. Daniel was not only blocking the door now. He was creating an audience for the version he wanted remembered. Maria placed her tablet on the counter. The authorized roster is open. Daniel glanced at the screen but did not read it. Restricted names require supervisor confirmation. I am the Federal Security Supervisor. The silence that followed was brief but revealing. Daniel looked toward the camera above the entrance. Its lens was pointed directly at him. Then you can assume responsibility if something goes wrong, he said. Maria did not move. I already have. Rachel watched Daniel's confidence shift, not disappear, but become more careful. He knew Maria could override him. He also knew she had seen enough to question the report. Still, he refused to step aside. She has been uncooperative from the beginning, he said. Maria opened the protected camera feed on her tablet. The screen showed Rachel arriving, presenting identification, and asking for the scanner. It also showed Daniel covering the reader before she reached it. The recording does not show that, Maria said. Daniel's face tightened. Video does not capture attitude. Rachel looked at the word he had written in the log. Uncooperative. The same label Marcus Reed had received months earlier. The same word that transformed a request for fairness into a reason for suspicion. Your report was ready before the truth, Rachel said. Daniel closed the book. You are making this worse for yourself. No, she replied. I am making it visible. Maria reached for the credential wallet, but Rachel raised one hand. Not yet. If Maria entered the badge number in front of Daniel, the result would reveal Rachel's restricted title and might spread through the building before the red file reached the 6th floor. Maria understood the warning in her eyes. She turned the tablet face down. Wait here, she told Daniel. Then she stepped into the lobby and used the secure line beside the elevators. Upstairs, Thomas Whitmore sat at the head of a conference table surrounded by agents, prosecutors, and analysts. One chair remained empty. The digital clock changed to 6:27. Thomas looked at the sealed authorization code beside Rachel's name, then at the closed conference room door. Maria's voice came through his encrypted telephone. We have a problem at the east entrance. Thomas stood without asking for details. Around the table, conversations stopped. He buttoned his jacket, picked up the second key required to open Rachel's red briefcase, and walked toward the elevator. Rachel remained beside the east entrance while the elevator carried Thomas Whitmore down from the 6th floor. The lobby had grown quieter, but the silence did not feel respectful. It felt expectant, as though the building itself had paused to decide whose version of the morning would survive. Rain tapped against the glass canopy above the steps. Water gathered beneath Rachel's shoes and darkened the pale stone in a narrow crescent. The red briefcase rested against her leg, its sealed lock still unbroken. Inside it was the name of someone who might already understand that the briefing had been delayed. Daniel stood behind the desk with the visitor log closed beneath one hand. Maria remained near the secure telephone, watching the elevator numbers descend. No one spoke. Rachel looked at the digital clock. 6:28. 2 minutes remained before the scheduled briefing became an obvious failure. She imagined the people upstairs checking messages, comparing absences, wondering why the new commander had not arrived. One of them might be the person who had exposed protected operations. One of them might already be deleting files. For the first time that morning, Rachel felt doubt move beneath her control. Perhaps refusing to reveal her title had protected the mission. Perhaps it had destroyed the only advantage they had. She looked down at the credential wallet on the counter. The metal edge was cold beneath her fingers. A badge was supposed to represent verified authority, yet Daniel had treated it as decoration because the person holding it did not match the image he trusted. Rachel saw her reflection in the glass door, softened by rain and lobby light. For a moment, the years folded inward. She was 9 again, standing beside her father outside a federal courthouse. Samuel Bennett held a witness summons in a clear plastic folder. The guard looked at his work jacket, ignored the name on the page, and pointed toward a service entrance. Rachel remembered the shame in her own face more clearly than the guard's voice. Her father had placed one hand on her shoulder and said, "A closed door tells you who believes they own the room." He had not shouted. He had not begged. He had made the guard read the document. Daniel shifted behind the desk. "You could have avoided all of this by following directions," he said. Rachel lifted her eyes. "I followed the procedure you refused to use. I acted on a security concern." "You created the concern, then used it as proof." His expression tightened, but Rachel did not look away. "The door is not the problem," she continued. "Your decision is." Maria watched Daniel's hand move toward the visitor log, then stop. The word uncooperative remained inside the closed book, waiting to become official. Rachel understood how easily that single word could outlive the truth. It could appear in a review, justify the delay, and turn her calm resistance into misconduct. That was how systems protected bias. Not always with insults. Sometimes with neutral language entered by the person who controlled the record. The elevator indicator reached the second floor. Rachel heard the machinery behind the wall, a low mechanical hum growing closer. She did not know whether Thomas would arrive in time to preserve the operation, but she knew what had to happen after this morning. The camera footage would be saved. The logs would be compared. Marcus's complaint would be reopened. Every unexplained delay at this entrance would be examined, not because Rachel held a senior title, but because no employee should need one to be treated fairly. The elevator reached the lobby. A soft chime sounded. Daniel straightened his uniform and opened the visitor log again, perhaps hoping the page would protect him. The doors parted. Thomas Whitmore stepped out beside two senior agents, carrying the second key to the red briefcase. He looked first at Rachel, then at the untouched scanner, and finally at the word Daniel had written beneath her name. His face became still. "Agent Bennett," he said, "give me your badge number." Thomas Whitmore's question changed the room. Daniel looked from Rachel to the two senior agents beside him, then toward Maria Torres, as if one of them might explain why the men in charge of the entire field office had addressed the woman outside by title. Rachel lifted her credential wallet from the counter. 472916, she said. Maria entered the number into the secure terminal. The scanner that Daniel had blocked all morning came alive beneath her hand. A green light spread across the display. Active federal credential. Top secret clearance. Assistant Special Agent in charge. The words remained on the screen long enough for everyone in the lobby to read them. Daniel's face lost its certainty. His eyes moved to the visitor log, where he had written unidentified, uncooperative, and claimed federal authority. Each word now looked less like a security judgment and more like evidence. Thomas took the red briefcase from Rachel and placed his authorization key into the second lock. "The task force has been waiting for its new commander," he said. The senior agents behind him straightened. Marcus Reed had returned to the edge of the lobby and stood silently near the elevators. Several employees who had watched Rachel being turned away now looked at the floor. Daniel cleared his throat. "Sir, I was following protocol." Her appointment was restricted, and she arrived without an escort. Thomas looked at the untouched scanner. "Protocol required you to verify the credential. I had concerns about the presentation." Rachel's expression remained still. "What presentation?" Daniel hesitated. "The circumstances. The way she arrived." "Alone?" Thomas asked. "In a plain coat?" Maria added. Daniel looked toward the camera above the entrance. Its lens was still pointed at him. "I made a judgment call." Rachel stepped closer to the counter, not to intimidate him, but to place the credential beside the report he had written. "Would you have scanned it if my title were lower?" Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. The answer had nowhere safe to go. Thomas turned to Maria. "Preserve the camera footage, access roster, desk calls, and visitor log." Maria nodded. "Already secured." "Review the previous 6 months." Daniel looked sharply at her. "For what?" Marcus spoke from across the lobby. "For the rest of us." The words carried more weight than anger. Maria opened another file on her tablet. We have documented complaints involving delayed access for black employees and contractors. At least 3 include valid credentials that were not scanned. Daniel looked at Marcus. Recognition entered his face. Your complaint was closed. Without reviewing the full camera record, Marcus replied. Thomas shifted his attention back to Daniel. Officer Mercer, what is your badge number? The question sounded simple, but Daniel understood its meaning. He slowly read the number from the metal plate on his chest. Maria recorded it. Thomas did not threaten him or raise his voice. You will remain at this desk until your supervisor arrives. You will not alter the log or access any archived footage. Daniel's hand moved away from the book. Rachel picked up her credential wallet and faced the scanner. For the first time that morning, she placed it against the reader. The green light appeared immediately. The lock released. The door opened. Rachel paused before crossing the threshold and looked at Daniel. There was no triumph in her face. My rank changed your fear, she said. It should not have changed my right to be verified. Then she stepped into the lobby. Thomas followed with the red briefcase, and the senior agents moved toward the elevators. As the doors began to close, Maria's tablet displayed a second report from months earlier. Same entrance. Same officer. Same word. Uncooperative. Daniel stared at it through the narrowing gap, and for the first time, he saw the pattern he had spent years calling instinct. The classified briefing began 7 minutes late, but the delay did not destroy the investigation. Rachel opened the red briefcase with Thomas Whitmore's authorization key and placed the access analysis on the conference table. The data pointed to a senior task force coordinator who had quietly viewed protected schedules before 3 operations were compromised. By noon, federal investigators had secured the coordinator's devices, preserved the relevant records, and removed his access to the command center. The mission inside the building moved forward. The incident at the east entrance did not disappear with it. Maria Torres preserved every camera angle, telephone record, roster entry, and page from Daniel Mercer's visitor log. Captain Laura Mitchell arrived before the end of the morning shift and relieved Daniel from entrance duty pending an independent review. She did not remove his badge in the lobby or turn accountability into a public spectacle. She ordered him to surrender his building access card, leave the security desk untouched, and report to internal affairs with a union representative. Daniel looked toward Rachel as he left, but she had already returned upstairs. She had not come to humiliate him. She had come to protect a mission, and now she intended to protect the people his reports had misrepresented. Over the next 4 months, investigators compared Daniel's decisions across hundreds of entry records. The pattern was measurable. He allowed familiar white officials through without scanning their credentials, yet delayed black employees, contractors, and visitors even after valid documents were presented. He used the word uncooperative far more often in reports involving black personnel. In several cases, the camera footage showed calm requests for verification while his written summaries described hostility. Marcus Reed testified first. He described standing outside for 22 minutes while co-workers passed him without being checked. A black information technology contractor described missing an emergency briefing after Daniel refused to accept a temporary credential that the system had already approved. A federal prosecutor explained that Daniel had once asked whether she was a legal assistant despite the title displayed on her badge. Daniel listened from the opposite side of the hearing room. At first, he defended each incident separately. Different circumstances. Security judgment. Unusual behavior. Rachel waited until the independent investigator placed the visitor logs beside the camera transcripts. Then she spoke. Caution examines evidence, she said. Bias replaces evidence with expectation. Daniel looked at the repeated words beneath his signature. Unidentified. Aggressive. Uncooperative. The labels had seemed neutral when he wrote them. Now he heard how consistently they had been used to make other people responsible for his suspicion. I believed I was protecting the building, he said. Marcus looked at him across the table. You were protecting your idea of who belonged inside it. Daniel lowered his eyes. For the first time, he did not argue. The final review found that he had violated credential verification policy, ignored supervisory instructions, and documented several encounters inaccurately. He was permanently removed from federal facility access duty and reassigned by his department to administrative work while completing remedial training and a formal performance review. Under a written accountability agreement, he was required to correct every inaccurate entry identified by investigators and provide signed notices to the affected employees. Rachel insisted that the corrections remain attached to the original report so the institution could not pretend the mistakes had never existed. Marcus received an amended record stating that his credential had been valid and his conduct professional. The same correction was issued to 12 other employees and contractors. Daniel met with them individually, not to ask for forgiveness, but to acknowledge what he had done. Some accepted his apology. Others did not. Rachel considered both responses fair. 6 months after that rainy morning, the command center replaced informal recognition with a universal rule. Every employee, including senior officials, had to scan a credential. Every denial generated an automatic record. Security officers could no longer substitute familiarity or appearance for verification. At the first training session, Daniel stood before a room of new officers with the old visitor log open beside him. He pointed to Rachel's name and the word he had written beneath it. "I thought instinct made me experienced," he said. "It made me stop checking the truth." 1 year after the rainy morning at the east entrance, Rachel Bennett arrived at the Joint Operations Command Center shortly before sunrise. The glass doors reflected a clear winter sky, and the pale stone floor no longer carried the dark trail of rainwater she remembered. The security desk had changed. Every employee, contractor, and senior official now used the same scanner. No one passed through because an officer recognized a face. No one was delayed because an officer decided a face looked unfamiliar. Rachel placed her credential against the reader. A soft tone sounded. The light turned green. "Good morning, Assistant Special Agent in Charge Bennett," the security officer said. Rachel returned the greeting and stepped inside. Marcus Reed was waiting near the elevators with 2 cups of coffee and a folder containing the final report from the access review. 13 inaccurate entries had been corrected. 12 employees and contractors had received formal acknowledgments that their credentials had been valid and their conduct professional. The original reports remained in the archive beside the corrections, not to preserve shame, but to preserve the lesson. Institutions could not learn from mistakes they quietly erased. As Rachel and Marcus crossed the lobby, a young black woman approached the entrance from outside. She appeared to be in her late 20s and wore a simple navy coat over a gray suit. A worn backpack rested on one shoulder. She paused beneath the security light, opened a credential wallet, and looked toward the officer behind the desk. Rachel recognized the hesitation immediately. It was the brief, guarded breath of someone preparing to explain why she belonged. The officer did not study her clothing or search the sidewalk for an escort. "Good morning," he said. "Please scan your credential." The young woman raised her badge. Green light. Active access. "Welcome, Agent Collins." Her shoulders relaxed. She entered without defending her position, proving her education, or naming someone powerful who could confirm her identity. The system had done what it was designed to do. It had checked the evidence before judgment could fill the space. Across the lobby, Daniel Mercer stood beside Captain Laura Mitchell carrying a box of corrected training records. He no longer worked at the entrance. His administrative assignment required him to review access decisions and identify language that turned assumptions into official facts. The work was quiet and repetitive. There was no applause in it. That was part of the accountability. Daniel saw Rachel, then noticed Agent Collins passing through the door. He looked toward the scanner and lowered his eyes. Rachel did not approach him for an apology. He had already given one, and she had never promised forgiveness in return. Instead, she watched him remove the final inaccurate report from the box and replace the word uncooperative with a factual description of what the camera had shown. Employee requested standard credential verification. Daniel signed the correction and handed it to Captain Mitchell. Rachel gave him one small nod. It did not erase the past. It recognized that he had stopped asking others to carry the consequences of his assumptions. The elevator doors opened. Marcus stepped inside, but Rachel remained in the lobby for another moment. Agent Collins was waiting near the directory, searching for the 6th-floor briefing room. Rachel walked over and pointed toward the correct elevator. "First day?" she asked. The young agent smiled. "Yes, ma'am. You are expected upstairs." Agent Collins thanked her and moved forward with greater confidence. Rachel watched the doors close behind her. A year earlier, the same entrance had been used to decide who looked important enough to enter. Now it asked only one question: were the credentials valid? Rank had not created Rachel's dignity. A title had only forced others to confront what they should have recognized without it. Kindness had kept her from turning accountability into humiliation, but kindness had never required silence. Sometimes its strongest form was preserving the truth, correcting the record, and holding a door open for the next person. The scanner sounded again behind her. Another green light appeared. Another employee entered without being judged first. Rachel turned toward the elevators as morning sunlight spread across the lobby, leaving one question behind: when a stranger stands at a closed door with proof in hand. Do we check the facts, or do we trust the story our assumptions have already written?